When you don't have enough desks, enough books, enough everything for the schools in your area where you're taxed an additional rate, then it's a problem.
Some Eastlake residents are not happy that their tax dollars are being used to build schools in other neighborhoods. No more drugging migrant children. That's the ruling today from an LA judge in response to a practice taking place at a Texas holding facility.
Tremendous opportunity right now for anglers who want to go offshore and spend a day or a few days fishing.
And not everyone's suffering with San Diego's above average temperatures. The heat is actually making it better for some and some pretty good fishing. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Millions of tax dollars collected in Chula Vista's Eastlake neighborhood have helped build schools in other parts of the city. iNews Source reporter Leonardo Castañeda explains why not everyone is happy about that.
At least $46 million of Mello-Roos property taxes collected in Eastlake were spent to help build schools in other parts of the Sweetwater School District. That includes $19 million of Eastlake taxes went to build Olympian High School in Otay Ranch and millions more for other schools in Otay Ranch and San Isidro. I talked to Maddie Adado, who has lived in Eastlake for 30 years. She says spending that money outside her neighborhood is misguided.
I mean, when you don't have enough desks, enough books, enough everything for the schools in your area where you're taxed an additional rate, then it's a problem.
Adado also thinks what Sweetwater is doing is illegal because the Eastlake Mello-Roos tax district says monies collected there will go for a high school and a middle school in Eastlake. Sweetwater's Mello-Roos expert Roxana Travers said district official asked an outside law firm and tax consultant to look at what they were doing. They were told that they were on solid legal footing.
It's basically saying that our cost allocation plan is sound and equitable.
She says Sweetwater can spend Eastlake Mello-Roos money on schools outside the neighborhood as long as the money goes to house new Eastlake students. That doesn't satisfy homeowner Adado.
I personally think that there is a refund due to CFD1.
For KPBS, I'm iNews Source reporter Leonardo Castañeda.
Another development in the short-term rental saga in San Diego. Airbnb and HomeAway claim council members broke the rules when they signed off on a plan to regulate vacation rentals. In a letter to the city council, both groups say another public hearing is needed because council members made so many changes to the proposed ordinance and neighbors didn't get a chance to review it. Starting next year, homeowners who want to rent out homes will be required to pay nearly $1,000 for a license. Starting tomorrow, people will be able to download the blueprints for 3D guns. California's Attorney General is joining 20 others, urging the Department of Justice to stop it. Here's video from the Texas-based manufacturer showing off its 3D firearm technology. Last summer, the company reached a settlement with the government, allowing it to post printable gun frame plans online. Opponents argue these frames are dangerous because they are virtually untraceable. The company calls them ghost guns, lacking serial numbers. President Donald Trump tweeted about the 3D guns today, saying already spoke to NRA. Doesn't seem to make much sense. Opponents also point out background checks are not required to download the blueprints. And as of Monday, 8 states have joined a lawsuit asking for a temporary restraining order. Some California police agencies have started collecting data about people they stop. KPBS reporter Taryn Minto walks us through how the local agency is complying with a state law intended to combat racial profiling.
Assembly Bill 953 says California police officers must document race and other details about people they encounter. The bill, also known as the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, or RIPA, was proposed by San Diego Assemblywoman Shirley Weber in 2015. Around that time, killings of unarmed black men by police had drawn national attention. Weber wanted a system in California to track any discrimination by law enforcement and hold departments accountable for it. The data collection part of that system began July 1st for the state's largest agencies. That includes the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. KPBS reviewed the department's training materials that explain the new process. This is what we learned. The first thing you should know is officers are not supposed to directly ask your race, ethnicity, or other identifying information for their RIPA stop report. They must determine this based on their perception. So you may not even notice when officers are documenting information about you. So what are they required to collect? It's actually a lot of information. The Sheriff's Department says there are 21 to 35 questions in a typical RIPA stop report, with 117 possible selections. They include details about who made the stop, when, where, and why it happened, how long it took, and what actions the officer made. And when it comes to recording information about you, it won't include your name or other identifiable details. It will include perceptions the officer has about you, your race or ethnicity, gender, age, ability to speak English, whether you have a disability, and if you identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and/or transgender. Again, these answers are to be based on what an officer thinks, and they can't be changed even if an officer later learns they were wrong. For example, if an officer thought someone was Hispanic and later learned they were Asian, they still have to write down Hispanic because that was the officer's perception. How agencies will document and submit this information to the state may vary. The Sheriff's Department created its own mobile app to log the information. Documents show the app reduced what the department said would have been a daunting requirement. The agency tested it with 30 deputies in Vista and San Marcos and found after regular use, it added about 3 to 5 minutes to each stop. The agency shared its app with the San Diego Police Department and sheriff's offices in other counties. It also posted the source code publicly online. The law requires officers log this information for nearly every person they stop, but the documents do show there are cases where that may not be required. For example, the info is required for a driver when they're pulled over, but it's not always for the passenger. Officers don't have to log the information when a person is served an arrest or search warrant at their home, but they do have to log it if they contact anyone else inside that home. It's also not required in detention facilities or during routine security checks, such as a weapons screening at public buildings. But they do have to file a report if that screening results in a detention. Then the data, minus officers' names, will get shared with the state to make it public. The state RIPA board will use it to make policy recommendations. But there may be some technical issues to solve. In a memo, the department said it needed to work out an error reconciliation process because the state may have problems with specific entries of the way that we collect data. Regardless of the sharing process, Sheriff Bill Gore wrote in a department email that he was looking forward to the results. He said, "I am confident, and initial testing has proven our data reflects the communities we serve, and there will be no identified bias on the part of our personnel." The first deadline to submit RIPA data to the state is next April. It will be made public and be analyzed by the state's RIPA board by 2020. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
The Sheriff's Department declined an on-camera interview. In Part 2 tomorrow, we'll explore how bias is formed and why tracking perceptions can help. North County's 49th Congressional District is one of the most competitive House races in the country. iNews Source reporter Jill Castellano tells us how the candidates have been raising and spending money since the June 5th primary. So, Jill, the 49th Congressional District race is considered possibly one of the most competitive in the nation, with Democrat Mike Levin running against Republican Diane Harkey. How is Levin doing in terms of fundraising?
Levin is doing very well in terms of fundraising, actually, and we know this based on his latest financial reports. All of these House candidates have had to file their latest reports a couple of weeks ago. So this is our first chance to see how they're doing since the primary election. We know that Levin is starting to get the backing of a lot of big Democratic groups. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, or the DCCC, has started backing his campaign, even though they did not during the primary. During the primary, there were 16 candidates and so many Democrats running that it was kind of hard to see who was going to win, but now they know Levin is their man. So they've donated $5,000 to his campaign. We also know that he's getting money through a platform called Act Blue, which is a way for individuals around the country to support Democrats that they want in office. And one more thing that we know is that there are a couple of big names donating to his campaign as well. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has donated to his campaign, among other House Democrats. And Sarah Jacobs, who finished third in the primary, who is a Democrat that barely lost to Mike Levin, gave him $2,700 for his campaign.
So what about the Republican in the race, Diane Harkey, who is a former state assemblywoman? Where's her campaign financing coming from?
She's getting money from a lot of different sources, too. There are some big political action committees who have been funding her campaign. We know she's getting money from groups that represent auto dealers, oil companies, and physicians. And the Koch industries, run by the Koch brothers, have donated some money to her campaign as well. We also know that Darrell Issa, who's the representative in office now, has endorsed her to replace him, and he's given $5,000 to her campaign. That being said, Levin has still raised a lot more money than she has. He's raised about 3 times as much money as she has, and has about 5 times as much money in the bank. So we're going to see how this plays out in terms of how they're able to communicate with voters this fall and how they're going to get their messages across with the money that they have.
So let's turn now to the 50th congressional district, with the incumbent being Republican Duncan Hunter, and he's going against Democrat Amar Campa-Najjar. How much money have these two candidates raised?
Well, this is interesting because Duncan Hunter is the incumbent, he's the Republican, and this is a very Republican district where it's one of the most Republican districts in California. And yet he's not doing the best in fundraising. Campa-Najjar has raised more money than he has, $1 million versus about $850,000. And part of what's happening here is that Hunter is facing an FBI investigation into some previous campaign spending, and it's kind of affecting his fundraising. He's actually spent more money than he's raised this election cycle, about $1.2 million spent so far. So we're going to see how that plays out. But he did do so well in the primary, and it's going to be a pretty big upset if he loses. To help his campaign, Campa-Najjar has actually recently brought on board a very well-known national consultant, Joe Trippi, who's pretty well known for supporting Jerry Brown and for helping that Alabama Senator Doug Jones upset Roy Moore last year.
You've reviewed the financial reports which were submitted by the candidates running for the House. Any surprises?
Well, one thing to take a look at always is, even in these safe seats, how are candidates spending their money, even if they're very likely to win re-election? And there are 3 other seats in San Diego County that are held by Democrats right now running in the House that are worth paying attention to. They are very likely to win, but where are all those resources going that they're able to raise with their incumbency? Juan Vargas, who's in the 51st District, has been helping other House Democrats in Massachusetts and Florida and Iowa raise money for their campaigns. He's given them a couple $1,000s for their own campaigns. Susan Davis, who served 9 terms in the 53rd District in California, has donated $2,000 to Mike Levin, who's running for that really competitive 49th seat.
So we can count on you to follow the money. Jill Castellano, iNews Source reporter, thank you so much.
Thank you.
iNews Source is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. An official with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services told senators today that his agency warned the Trump administration that separating migrant families would be dangerous for the children.
During the deliberative process over the previous year, we raised a number of concerns in the ORR program about any policy which would result in family separation due to concerns we had about the best interest of the child, as well as about whether that would be operationally supportable with the bed capacity we had. Separation of children from their parents entails significant risk of harm to children.
Well, it's traumatic.
The State Judiciary Committee questioned officials about the government's zero-tolerance policy that has resulted in the separation of migrant children from their detained families. Trump dropped the policy more than a month ago under fire from Democrats and Republicans alike. But of the more than 2,500 children who were separated from parents and guardians, hundreds remain in federal custody. Today, a Los Angeles judge ruled the government can no longer drug migrant children. The U.S. District Judge ruled the federal government is in violation of a longstanding settlement of governing the treatment of migrant children taken into custody at the border. Judge Dolly G. says the government must get consent or a court order to give the children psychotropic drugs unless it's an emergency. The practice was taking place at a Texas holding facility. The Department of Justice has declined to comment on the ruling. Tonight, Frontline investigates migrant families separated at the border. Former ICE Director Thomas Homan says he didn't hear the ProPublica audio of children being taken from their parents. So, correspondent Martin Smith plays it for him.
On June 18th, an audio tape was published by ProPublica. It led the news for days. When you heard the tape the ProPublica published of the children wailing, what was your reaction?
I didn't hear the tape.
Oh, come on.
I did not hear the tape. I did not hear the tape.
I can't believe that.
I've heard many children cry in my 34 years. I don't need to hear children cry.
Can I play it for you?
Yeah.
It's a young girl who asks to call her aunt. She wants to call her aunt. She has the number memorized. What do you think?
It tugs at the heartstrings for sure.
How can you not condemn that?
Look, I've seen a lot of terrible things in my 34 years. Well, we have to address the border. I mean,
do you not sympathize with their
absolutely.
situation?
I'm a parent. It's sad, but when the government chooses to enforce the law and they separate the parent that's been prosecuted, just like every U.S. citizen person in this country gets separated when he gets arrested, but people want a different set of rules for an illegal alien.
You can watch the rest of Frontline's new documentary, Separated Children at the Border, tonight at 10 p.m. on KPBS. An Aeromexico plane crashed today after taking off from the Mexican state of Durango. The state's governor says everyone on board survived. The Civil Defense Office tweeted photos from the crash site showing a lot of smoke and, so far, minimal damage to the aircraft. The airline says 100 people were on board. The flight was heading to Mexico City.
I'm John Yang. Tonight on the NewsHour, ahead of the midterm elections, Facebook detects dozens of fake accounts and deletes the bad actors. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Firefighters are still working to gain control of the car fire in Shasta County near Redding. So far, it has burned more than 110,000 acres. It has been named the 7th most destructive fire in state history, and it's only about 27% contained. More than 2,500 structures are threatened and hundreds of homes have been destroyed. CAL FIRE officials say the fire was caused by sparks from a trailer. A mixture of high and low temperatures have stirred up substantial winds, creating a tornado of fire and smoke, which has made it nearly impossible for air tankers to douse these flames.
An aircraft needs a glide path into that, so they cannot fly because they cannot see. So with a helicopter, we have all the equipment on standby during these type of events.
Nearly 1,500 firefighters are battling about 15 major wildfires statewide, and CAL FIRE Officials are asking everyone to check the perimeter of their vehicles to make sure nothing is dragging on the ground that could spark a fire. The state attorney general is warning people in areas affected by wildfires of price gouging. Governor Jerry Brown has declared a state of emergency in Riverside, Shasta, and San Bernardino counties due to fires. State law prohibits charging more than 10% more than the item or service was priced before the declaration of an emergency. If convicted, violators face 1 year in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. In response to the heat, San Diego County is closing a handful of county parks. These include El Capitan Preserve near Lakeside, Mount Gower near Ramona, Hellhole Canyon Preserve in Valley Center, and Wilderness Gardens in Paula will be closed through August, while Agua Caliente Regional Park and Vallecito County Park and Anza-Barango are closed for the entire summer. The good news is there are nearly 100 other county parks and preserves open to explore. Humidity and higher than normal temperatures today around San Diego. Erin Calandra has your full forecast.
Well, I hope you enjoyed your day today. The weather is pretty nice, although along the coast and just around the interior areas, it is above average for temperatures, up to about 5 degrees warmer than it should be. But we also have more humidity. So the real feels in San Diego today around 100 degrees. The AccuWeather real feel, that's how it feels when you step out your door. And notice we could see a couple of showers and storms popping up, mainly in the eastern regions of the county. We have some moist air lingering around. So don't be surprised if you see a brief shower or a storm popping up, especially if you're in the mountains, the deserts, even into San Diego tonight. Can't rule one out. Temperatures in Oceanside, 67 tonight. Chula Vista, around 70. In San Diego, the low will reach 73 degrees. You'll notice some clouds out there. Tomorrow, plenty of sun. Now, we could see some of those storms popping up again tomorrow, but mostly in the evening time. Right along the coast, it will be slightly cooler because of that nice Pacific breeze. So San Diego, 83, sunshine. In Ramona, 95 degrees. Chula Vista sitting right around 81. Could see a couple of those storms again bubbling up in Mount Laguna at 82 degrees. Along the coast, expect to see pretty nice conditions, although it will be on the humid side. Our temperatures will be in the low 80s. It's going to feel warmer than that. And in the interior areas, we're going to be mostly in the 90s this week with sunny conditions. And in the mountains, that's where we will see some spotty storms, at least through Thursday. Drier conditions by the weekend with sunny skies, and the temperatures will stay in the 80s. It's actually slightly cooler in the mountains than it could be this time of year. And then in the deserts, we're still in the triple digits. That's normal. We could see a couple of showers and storms through Thursday, but the rest of the week is looking awfully dry and sunny. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Ebony, back to you.
The National Weather Service says ocean temperatures along the San Diego coast are hovering in the high 70s. That's 10 degrees above average. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says this warm water is translating into good fishing.
If you're able to get on a boat,
there's tremendous opportunity right now for anglers who want to go offshore and spend a day or a few days fishing.
Frank Urcity is the owner of H&M Landing in Point Loma.
There's H&M, Point Loma in the middle, and then Fisherman's Landing. We have 30, there's 60 boats here in the basin, so we have the lion's share of it here at H&M Landing.
Urcity is also a board member for the Sport Fishing Association of California. He says with high water temperatures right now, big fish are biting.
It's optimal conditions for tuna species and other game fish like yellowtail, dorado, yellowfin tuna, the bluefin tuna that we're seeing. We have elevated sea surface temperatures, and of course, with that comes good feed.
Normally, to catch large fish, charter boats head out for long distances for 10 or 15 days at a time. But H&M Landing says their customers are catching the same huge fish in day trips near the coast.
There isn't any better time. It started off this year for us in May. And honestly, it's just ramping up. We're coming into the first part of August. I anticipate this fishing will remain consistently good deep into the fall, likely into the first part of November.
Urcity says the warm water is also drawing in larger fish closer to shore, and says people pier fishing could see some big catches. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Trash washed ashore on the Pacific Coast has a new life in New Orleans. It's part of an exhibit at the city's aquarium.
There's hangers, there's flip-flops, there's eyeglasses.
The artist has collected the garbage and made sea creatures out of it. A giant shark made out of bottle caps with toilet seat bits for teeth and a whale rib cage out of discarded plastic bottles. The artist says she hopes the exhibit will make people aware of just how much plastic trash finds its way to waterways and then on to the ocean.
Plastic pollution is something we can do something about. It's not out of our reach. We can do something about it. We can look at our consumer habits. We can change our way of buying things. We can increase our use of recycling. We can change our products. It's not impossible.
The artwork is part of Washed Ashore, Art to Save the Sea. More than 70 pieces are currently being shown in 3 exhibits currently traveling the U.S. Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, on the campaign trail in Ohio, the latest test of voter sentiment in a special congressional election. And on Midday Edition, celebrating Latino playwrights at the San Diego Rep. We have a preview of Latinx New Play Festival tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.